Today, people are often told that if you simply post an image or a video to Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or YouTube, that you will magically engage hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in your core audience. The fact is there are over 60 billion messages sent on digital platforms each day. Your content must overcome the noise and stand out. The bottom line is, in order to generate mass exposure for your brand or message, you need to design a content strategy that is designed specifically to your audience and specifically to your business objectives. As a digital strategist, I'm often brought into situations where companies have burned through hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars, on ineffective strategies. Today we are going to review how to design, identify, and execute a content strategy specific to your goals and objectives that will allow you to systematically hack mass exposure of your brand or message. A key area of where I see people go wrong with content is they're often operating without a clear short or long-term content strategy and without an effective way to clearly measure in real time how people are responding to their brand or message, thus missing out on a huge opportunity to mine that data to inform and fuel future content that they produce. That's the bottom line, is without that ability to measure and respond with how people are sharing your message, you can never learn to dictate the content you're producing. In addition, agile content creation is critical. The biggest mistake that I see people make with content is they're often investing too heavily in select specific content pieces and putting all of their eggs in one basket and essentially looking for a needle in a haystack and hoping and expecting something to go viral. But if you truly want to hack mass exposure around your brand or message, the best way to do this is by systematically hacking word-of-mouth sharing of your content, getting people to share your content at a high velocity and a consistent basis. And the way to achieve this is through three things. First, you need an agile environment to produce content. You need the ability to create content on a consistent basis that's both time efficient and cost efficient. Secondly, once you have that agile environment set up, you need the ability to specifically test that content you're producing in the agile environment. So you need to take that content from the agile environment, put it through tests. And through those tests, the third and most important thing you need is the ability to effectively measure the response of how people are responding to that content. Are people sharing it? Are people not sharing it? Without that, your content strategy is ultimately going to fail. A case in point, Couric, one of the most prominent news journalists of our time, with over 20 plus years on television shows such as The Today Show, ABC News, NBC News, and CBS News, had built up a habitual relationship with her consumers, with her fan base. The fans and consumers of her content knew every day if they tuned in at the same channel at the same time, there would be Katie delivering the news. There would be Katie delivering a story that you needed to hear. Then in 2013, she made a complete shift from a TV-first strategy with her content to a digital-first strategy with her content. And at that point in time, that habitual relationship was completely severed with her consumer base and with people consuming her content. No longer could they tune in at the same time every day and see Katie's content, see the stories that she was covering. She was now in a world where she was competing against 60 other billion messages a day. And she was feeling it. People were coming up to her saying, Katie, we can't find your content. We miss you. We love your content. But how do we find it? She was hearing that both from fans and both from people that she worked with. So she came to me as a digital strategist and said, what can we do about this? How can we solve this issue? First and foremost, I knew that we needed to design a content strategy that was specific to our audience and was specific to her objectives. And her objectives were clear. She wanted to reconnect with all of those fans and people that consumed her content for 20 plus years on television just on a digital device and the digital platforms. In addition, she needed to overcome the noise and overcome the clutter of 60 other billion messages a day in order to get her content and message heard. So I started by asking her, Katie, who is the next person you're interviewing? And she told me that she was interviewing the actress Elizabeth Banks. So I stopped and I thought for a minute. I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So Elizabeth Banks, she's in the blockbuster movie franchise, The Hunger Games. She's in the blockbuster movie franchise, Pitch Perfect, and she's a strong advocate for feminism. So those are the 3 areas that we are going to focus on for your interview. And what we're going to do is we're going to design questions specific to each of those audiences. So we're going to design questions specific for Hunger Games fans, specific to Pitch Perfect fans, and specific to advocates of feminism. And the idea and strategy behind these questions are to evoke an emotional response, not just in Elizabeth Banks, but the fans of each of those 3 categories, so that when they consume that content, they're going to be moved to a point where they're going to be compelled to share that content with their peers. So Katie took those notes and that strategy, and she went off and filmed the 30-minute interview. And when she came back with that 30-minute interview, then we cut the 30-minute into 30 to 90-second clips, about 10 to 15 of them. So we had 10 to 15, 30 to 90-second clips. And then once we had those individual clips, I created between 50 to 150 variations of each clip. And then we had about over 1,000 total variations of this one specific interview that she shot. And once we had those 1,000 variations, I took them to the Facebook platform, and I A/B test them against each other all in real time. So over the course of 24 hours, I would sit there and measure in real response each variation against each other. And what I was looking for was whether people were sharing a variation at a high velocity. So variations that weren't being shared at a high velocity, I would turn off immediately. And the ones that were being shared at a high velocity, I would turn up. So over the course of 24 hours, I dwindled it down to a few select variations that were performing at a high level. And I said, hey, if you like these clips talking about Hunger Games or Pitch Perfect or feminism, why don't you come over here to Yahoo and consume the entire interview? So over the course of 16 months, I used this process, the same strategy, for 160 different interviews. In over 160 interviews, we were able to generate over 150 million views, increase their social shares by 200%, and save Yahoo over $31 million in traffic acquisition costs, the cost of driving somebody from Facebook or a digital platform to Yahoo to consume more of her content. Why did this process work? It worked because first and foremost, we set up an agile content creation process. We sat down and actively talked about don't fall in love with a specific segment or an interview. If it doesn't work, it's okay. What we will do is we will learn from that. We will identify why that interview didn't work, and we will apply those learnings to the next one and do that over and over again. So we had the agile content creation process set up. Then we set up a sophisticated testing system. Over the course of 160 interviews, we tested over 50,000 variations of content. And through that testing methodology, we set up a process to actually measure and learn from each of those tests and variations, to the point where we could actually identify exactly who Katie should interview, the questions she should ask, and the topics and themes to cover, because we had that entire system set up to measure and learn and refine. So at the end of the day, what did we learn? We learned not to invest too heavily or fall in love with a select few pieces of content. Instead, create an agile system to test and refine your content and learn over time, and let those learnings dictate your short and long-term content strategy. From there, we got the audience to do the heavy work for us. We overcame the noise and the clutter because we identified variations that were resonating with specific audiences that would share it with their peer group and the world. And that's how we were able to generate a significant amount of awareness and cost savings. So now people are coming back up to Katie and saying, Katie, we love that interview you just on Yahoo, or we've been checking out the content that you've been producing. We really love engaging with your content. So now people were able to see the work the way she intended it. It's through other people telling other people you need to see this interview. So today we reviewed how to identify, design, and execute a content strategy that will allow you to successfully hack mass exposure for your brand. And the bottom line is, in order to generate mass exposure, you need to design a content strategy that is specific to your audience and specific to your business objectives. So the takeaway for today is, start looking at the content that you're producing and start looking at the content your competitors are producing. And start looking at, well, why did this piece of content get shared 1,000 times and this piece of content only get shared twice? There is a complexity to it, but at its basic level, people are sharing content because there's an emotional connection to it. It makes them angry, it makes them sad, it makes them laugh, it makes them cry. And those emotions compel them to share that content with other people. People also share content because it gives them social currency. They identify with a specific message, and thus they want the world and their peers to know that they identify with that specific message. It makes them look a specific way to the people they're sharing it with. And as you do this over time, as you start to learn, you'll start seeing the trends of what causes somebody to share a message versus not sharing a message. And with that, you will start being able to apply those learnings to your audience, to your content, to your message. And with that, as you get better, you will allow yourself and your brand to successfully hack sharing content of your brand or message, and thus resulting with mass exposure of your brand.